You're listening to the Modern Life Mystic Woman podcast, hosted by Jen Neville and Taiha Lee.
Modern Life Mystic Woman started as a conversation about writing, dreaming, dating, magic, God, tarot, astrology, and our mutual passion for consciously creating both spiritually fulfilling and totally luxurious lifestyles.
We're all about living in alignment, being tapped in AF, and going all in on ascension. We're committed to intuition, inspiration, and creation.
We are the bold and the spiritual, and we're moving cosmic mountains together.
All right, guys, we are back for another awesome episode of Modern Life Mystic Woman. I feel like since it's July, we're nearing the end of July at this point, where this may be getting released beginning of August. We're kind of just checking in. We're going to do kind of a summary of this year and kind of talk about the fun, exciting things we have going for us, or kind of like our intentions that we're setting for the next year. And kind of, just having a little spiritual conversation. It's like you get a behind the scenes look at us kind of just reflecting and planning everything that has been going on in 2020. It's been a wild year.
It has been wild.
I know. And I feel like there's these moments where, I see online all the time that everybody's like, 2020 is half over, and part of me is like, yeah, I want 2020. Like, I'm so big on traveling and like had so many travel plans this year that all of that kind of got shot down. Sometimes I catch myself being like, well, 2020 is just done, but it's like you can't let yourself get in that mindset of like wishing away time,
Yeah, and just using it really as like an opportunity
to kind of like slow down, I guess. I think that's been my biggest takeaway so far this year, is that I'm always kind of on the go and in a rush to get places. And I was just kind of writing in my journal about that, like right before we hopped on here. And it's like, for what? Like, what are you rushing towards?
Yeah.
Like, what are you hoping to find there at the end of the line,
I remember when this phrase came to me like years ago, and I was living with my best friend at the time, and it was like the summertime, and we were heading to the beach, and she was like rushing and rushing and rushing. And I'm like, girl, like you're just rushing to relax.
Yeah.
Right? Like, like, what if we just relaxed the whole time?
This is like, that's so funny to me, because I feel like if I were in that situation, and I definitely have a friend who's like that, who says things like that, and it makes me so angry, because I'm like, let's go, let's hurry. And if somebody were to say to me, like, you're just rushing to relax, but it's so true. But it's like that, like, what was her reaction to you saying that?
I don't, it probably similar. Like, yeah, like I just want to get there though.
Yeah, like, okay, well, let's go. I want to start relaxing soon.
That is actually a way that, and I find it myself, like I tend to like leave things, gotten a lot better. Like I've tended to leave things till the last minute sometimes. But I've found that I think, and talking about time travel and all that, I think that's a way that I've kind of learned to manipulate time in a way, because when you kind of tap into like, what if time is long? Like, what if I can actually expand this day? What if I can expand time? And what if it can all be done? Like, I've really been practicing that a lot, is like trusting myself that what if I could get all the things done that I want to do, and I don't have to rush to anything. I don't have to stress out.
Yeah.
Just one thing's going to flow into the next, and everything's going to work out.
Yeah. Gosh, even talking about this, I'm like, and I feel like it's been interesting. Like, that's one of the things I'll notice about, I guess, the difference of you and I is like, I just know about myself. I'm very like impulsive, and I'm very like, there's a lot of, even though I'm very kind of offset and monotone. Like if I start getting excited about something, there's a lot of energy behind that. And I've noticed, like, which is something that I appreciate in other people, is like even having conversations with you, it's like everything's like slow and calm. And it's like very like it doesn't sound like you ever get like super worked up, which is like peaceful. And I
Well, thank
think to
you.
myself, I'm like, oh my God, do I just come in and like I just know that I'm intense. I know I'm an intense person when I'm like locked in on something. So that's where I like realized I'm like, okay, like breathe, Jennifer. Breathe before you tell somebody this. Like, because I'll just get so excited. And then I get like crazy. And I have some friends that are like, you're being so aggressive right now. And I'm like, no, you don't get it. And then I'll get on these long tangents where they're just like, people are probably like, oh my God, something's wrong with this girl.
But I love, like, that's like the fiery passion that really does inspire people, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of where I channeled it to, is like, you know, trying to just use it as like motivating. But yeah, I do. And I learned a lot from that one friend of mine who's sometimes she drives me absolutely wild, but I did learn a lot from her in the sense of like, I tried to slow down my days. But yeah, I do have a tendency to, if I do want to get so many things done, I have a tendency to kind of be like, all right, boom, boom, like, let's do this. Like, instead of just kind of remembering, like, it's okay, there's 24 hours in a day. Like, you can fit everything in there.
Yeah.
So, like, this year so far has been, like, so slow. And it's like Groundhog's Day. Like, I'm doing the same thing over and over every day,
Right?
to where it's like, you know, mixing things up. And I have like this dichotomy where I love my routine. I think like with all my earth in my chart, it's like I love routine, I love stability, but then at the same time I've got like a lot of fire in my chart, to where I'm uh like I need like excitement and I need fun and I need all
Yeah.
this stuff, you know?
Totally. I know. And I'm the same way. Like my like daily morning routine is like so the exact same.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it, but at the same, I thought of that this morning when I woke up, and I'm just like, all right, another day, like Groundhog's Day. Like it's just,
Yeah.
I think I'm ready for a little, yeah,
I know.
shift.
So it's kind of like checking back in, and I feel like the first half of this year we went into quarantine. God, it feels so long ago now. March, that is long ago. So
I
it's like the
know.
beginning of March. It's like I had fostered a dog at one point. We started kind of this podcast. We
I know. I love
started,
that. That's like when our relationship started, was like, right. I remember like one of our first conversations, you were like, I just went to the grocery store, I stocked up. Like, I don't know what's going
yeah,
to happen.
yeah.
Yeah. How many months later is this?
I definitely sank into, at the beginning of quarantine, like that quarantine depression of like eating my frozen foods that I stocked up on. And it's like nice to look back at March and see the evolution, because part of me is like, I've done nothing this year. And then I'm like, oh no, but you've done so much. We
Mhm.
started this podcast. I formed some relationships, done so much work on myself.
Yeah.
Um, and all within the comfort of my own home. I just haven't even left my home in like for more than a day.
Yeah.
So it's like sometimes that's being put into perspective. You can do like, what's the quote? It's like, wherever you are, there you
There you'll
are,
be.
there
There.
you'll
Yeah.
be. Yeah. So it's like making the most out of this situation is a lesson
So
within
true.
itself. But yeah, that's been like, I look back at the beginning of March and I'm like, okay, you've accomplished a lot. And right now I've kind of been in this like nothing's really happening mode. And I'm kind of just like, what's next? What's next? But then it's like, at what point do we get to just be,
Be.
you know?
Well, I love that you said that, because you had to remind me of that like a week, or I guess it was maybe 2 weeks ago, when I was
Yeah.
like, okay, what's next? And you're like, okay, you've been manifesting this thing for a couple months. Like,
Yeah.
it's arriving. It's here now. Like, just be in it, just enjoy it. And I think like as driven women, lots of Capricorn,
Yeah.
like we
Oh
do, we
my God,
just
yeah.
constantly are thinking of what's next.
What's
And
next? I
so it's really
know.
good to have like someone to hold you accountable. Like it's
Yeah, or
okay, like
even
remind you
tell
it's
you like
okay.
it's okay to just have fun, like be social, enjoy the summer. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of like here we are, we're about to hit August, and it's just kind of for me, by the time I hit that August month, well, next week really, I've been doing, and this is kind of where, stemming back to either one of our episodes where we went on that time travel tangent. We have been on that ship since a while now. So
Yeah.
it's like really interesting right now. I kind of had a moment where obviously we can't travel across the borders. I was supposed to go to Vancouver. We were supposed to actually meet. That didn't happen. Hopefully it will soon. I don't know if I can go up there in the winter though. But
Yeah, and I'll probably be coming down there. But
yeah, you can come down here. But it's kind of like, yeah, I feel I kind of had this moment where I was tying up, I'm like, I need to tie up loose ends. I kind of said, screw it. I booked myself a trip to Sedona, which we kind of wanted to get into because I have it's going to be this whole spiritual adventure, spiritual journey for me. And it's kind of mixed in with the time travel. But I did book that trip, and I guess for the next 2 weeks or so until we hit August, I'm going out there for the full moon. Yeah, I'm just tying up these loose ends because I've done so much massive work on myself. Obviously, with the help of our sessions, I released so much that it's like, I'm going to let the universe tell me what's next, but I have to kind of, before I can move forward, I have to tie up these loose ends. Like I
yeah,
have to. So yeah, it's going to be really fun to kind of get into my plan for that trip because
I'm so
oh,
excited for you.
it's so okay. So basically, I guess I'm going to get into a little bit of a
Yeah.
tangent, but 2 years ago, no, not 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 2015, 2016. So 4 years ago, I went through this like breakup basically where, oh my gosh, I was devastated. And it was back when I was playing golf, and it was kind of the beginning of this journey for me. It was the beginning of my journey because the ending of me and that guy, who I still have never really been able to move past. I've never been able to move past that relationship. Never been able to move past like how it ended. And it's not from a place of like anger. It's more so from a place of like, I still have so much love for that person because of the fact that that's where like my journey started. Like he
Mm.
broke me wide open. Um, and that's kind of like the year that I started really realizing how unhappy I was doing what I was doing. It just broke me open on so many levels. So anyways, when I ended things with him, well, when the universe ended things between us, I was actually going out to Arizona for some golf tournaments. And my mom had told me like, oh, will you be close to Sedona? We were out there for like 2 weeks. So she was like, if you're close to Sedona, you got to go out to Sedona. So my girlfriend's on this trip with me. And it ended up being a really funny day because I was like, we have to go to Sedona. Like we have Saturday off. I'll drive us. Like we had to wake up. I made her wake up at like 3 a.m. so that we got there at like 5. And she's into this stuff, but she's not like, she's like, you're the only person in the world who could get me to climb a mountain in looking for energy vortex, like looking for good vibes. And I was like, we got to go to the energy vortex. It's going to make us feel better. She was kind of seeing his friend, and they broke up too. So I was like, it's going to make us feel better. We're going to get over these guys. So we get out there, and we did no research. So we just go to like the visitor center, and we were kind of like, okay, which mountain should we go to? Like, where should we go? And they kind of didn't, like, they were just like, oh, go to this one, I guess. And I think we just went to the first one we saw. So we get there and we realize it's like rock climbing.
Oh my God.
So we get to this thing. I have like a terrible fear of heights at this point in my life. I have this terrible fear of heights, and I'm like, oh, I can't climb up there. And she goes, you made me wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning. You're like, I didn't drive 2 hours out here that you're going to get scared and you're not going to like get up on this mountain. So I was like, oh shit. Okay. So we're rock climbing this thing. And it was like, it ended up being a fun day just because like by the time we got to the top of the thing, we were standing there and she's like, well, I'm over him. And I like looked at her, I'm like, really? And she's like, that's just what I'm going to tell myself, because if not, we drove all the way out here for nothing. And that's kind of like, it was such a funny day. But at the same time, that's kind of how I felt. I'm like, wow, I came out here and yeah, I came for the energy vortexes, but I didn't have like this experience that moved me. And it was like, I felt like I got cheated out of Sedona. So I've been like, since then, I've always wanted to go back. I've wanted to like really, now I'm on my journey. That was the beginning of it, because that was within that year, like the next 2 years, my golf career had crumbled. It took me a long time to even move on from that guy. My golf career had crumbled. I was an emotional wreck for like the next 2 years. Just dark night of the soul. Like that was my dark night of the soul. And
that was 4 years ago, you said?
That was 4 years ago. That was the start. Like me at Sedona kind of being like, I know what I want to do with my life. I just don't know how I'm going to do it. And like, it's just evolved from there. And it started with that guy. It started with that guy and him just shattering my heart. It started with him. So like, I'm so thankful for that heartbreak. And it's like, I had this moment where I was kind of doing all this like tying up loose ends thing. I had this dream, which I had posted about on my Instagram, where I went to like San Francisco. In the dream, I was like, I got to go to these cliffs in San Francisco. And then the big thing was I was going to San Francisco and then I was going to get on a plane to Sedona right after. And I was like, I got to go to San Francisco before I go to Sedona. So I go to San Francisco. I'm at these cliffs. I paid like a ridiculous Uber charge. This was all in the dream. And then so I wake up from the dream and I look at my memories on like Snapchat, and I was in San Francisco that day 2 years ago. And it was like the night before, it was the full moon. So I was asking myself, what have you mastered in the last 2 years? And then I remembered, wow, San Francisco was the weekend that I kind of, because I had already quit golf. I went to some Bob Proctor seminar. And that was the weekend that I had said to myself, like, okay, we can do this. Like, you can do this. You can put yourself out there. Like, you can be a life coach. You can do what it is that you want to do. And then within a few months, I started my tarot channel. So I was like, wow, in 2 years, I've really kind of built the foundation of what I wanted to create. And like, it's grown and prospered, obviously. So it's like, wow, what have I mastered in 2 years? A lot. And then I thought about that part where I'm like, I'm flying to Sedona next. Since the beginning of quarantine, I've wanted to go out to Sedona. And so I finally, after that dream, I just booked the ticket and I was like, I gotta go. I gotta tie up these loose ends. So for me, it's gonna be like this, I'm gonna leave some stuff there for my past self, or that past version of myself that went out there looking to find answers. So I'm gonna leave her some answers, and I'm gonna like, write a heartfelt note to her. Or I haven't decided really yet how I'm going to communicate this, but it's like, I want to let her know, like, hey, you do it, like, you figure it out. And then it's going to be, I'm going to definitely write the guy a letter, because I'm leaving him out there like I should have done the first time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, yeah.
When you mentioned the dream about having to go to San Francisco first, like the vision that I got was when you think of San Francisco, you think of the big bridge, and it's almost like maybe
Yeah.
it's like you have to cross the bridge
Hmm.
like before
Well, it
you.
was the cliffs. There's no cliffs there, but that was where I wanted to go. And the dream was, and
Mm,
I'd known I'd been there. Like when I was driving up, I was like, I've been here before. I've been here before. And
yeah.
then for me, when I woke up and I analyzed it, I was like, oh, that was where I took that leap, like that leap where I decided
Mm,
that the wheel started turning. And I wanted to go back there because I'm about to I just have this feeling. I was like, something big's coming in, but I've got to go tie up these loose ends. So I'm being called to
totally.
Sedona.
I love it. And when we started talking about this stuff of, leaving things for our past selves, what
Mm-hmm.
really clicked for me was when you were describing how, like, what if all these parallel versions of ourself, like, they're all happening simultaneously, kind of
Yeah,
thing, like in these layers. And so, like, if you really think about that, then yeah, like that past version of ourselves
there.
is still there.
Yeah,
Yeah. And like, I know, I just like, I love this idea that and it's like, if we really do create our reality, like we can believe that. And
yeah.
that means it's true,
It's so true. And if it's going to happen anywhere, it's going to happen at the energy vortexes in Sedona.
Right?
So that's kind of like
Absolutely.
I'm tying up those loose ends. When I went out there the first time, I came home, I reunited with this guy, and even though I knew it was like our final goodbye, and I feel like I need to go leave him out there. Like it's time.
Yeah.
I have to go leave him out there like I was supposed to do back then. Um
Well, and it's interesting too that this has come up because we've been doing all this work on like opening our heart and like opening up the feminine and making space for like the man that we actually want to
yeah.
come in.
Mhm.
And it's like, this is such a perfect example of how, like, when we set intentions, it doesn't mean like it just happens and there's no work. It's like we set the intentions and then we realize, like, oh, these are all the things that have been holding me back,
Yeah.
all the blocks that I might still have preventing this person from coming in or whatever it
From
might
coming
be. Like, I
in.
got to
Yeah.
deal with that.
And it's about like when you think of like destiny or fate or timelines or calling somebody back in, like we do create our realities, but the person, I don't know him anymore.
Mm,
Like for the people who are listening who are always like trying to manifest like that person back into their lives, like I could try, but I don't know him anymore. Not
mm-hmm,
that version, like that version of him doesn't exist anymore. It
mm-hmm,
exists in my memories in my mind, but like that's me not allowing him to grow and him to change into a different version of himself. And it's like I always have these moments where like, what if we were to meet again? Like what if we were to meet again now? How would it be different? Like I'm so much more evolved, and like I would love to just have that meeting just to say thank you, because he
mm,
changed my life. He like that connection changed my life. And it's one of those, like, it sounds so dramatic, but it's like I have so much appreciation for him and a lot of the lessons he taught me. And yeah, if we were to meet again, I've healed so many of the things, but it's one of those things where like he's not that person anymore either.
mm-hmm.
So it's always interesting, um, when we're talking about like manifesting people and these multitude of us that we have in the universe. It's so trippy, but it's so fascinating at the same time. So it's really like tying up these loose ends, leaving these, like putting like a wrapping up these last 4 years, putting a bow on it, and like leaving my thank you out there.
Yeah. And then like thinking of how that, like alchemizing that energy, like turning that into
Mm-hmm.
something else, like think about how that will change your future and like what you're guided
Yeah.
to next.
Yeah. So it's been, and that was kind of like I had started, that's how we connected, was I had started writing that kind of book at the beginning of quarantine. That was a lot about him and my connection with him. And it's kind of evolved into this So I just think I might print out what I've written about him and like just take it and leave it
Mm.
there.
I love that.
Yeah, take it, leave it there. And, and I think that we can communicate with other people in that way too, because I think we were talking about this at one point. Like, we can leave behind energy for other people. I
Yeah.
definitely think that happens because I feel some energy here in my presence all the time. My little 5D cock block. Somebody who just like my 5D lover who just fends off all these men. That's what I'm going to tell
Right?
myself. It's not me. The spirit.
I do think that's true though. Like I honestly I think that's what happens.
It is. And then so
Cause they're kind of like, wait, like wait for me, but like maybe like they're not ready yet or you're not ready
yeah,
yet.
yeah,
And
it could happen. I believe that it happens. I really do. I just think that it's so interesting because, yeah, I had told you I saw, like, my friend had sent me that he was there
mm-hmm.
recently. So it was funny because she had sent me that he had been there. And then so I was like, because she was laughing, she's like, oh my God, look who's in Sedona, the energy vortexes. So
Oh
I
my
was like,
God.
well, that's even better for me to go leave a message for him there because he was at the energy vortexes, so I can leave my thank
Yeah.
you. Like, that's how I can have that conversation so not only am I releasing that past version of myself, but I'll release that person too.
Yeah, like do some cord cutting and
Do some cord
yeah.
cutting, yeah. And just kind of leave it. Leave it in Sedona. Why Sedona? I don't know. But we're going to find out. We're going to find out. That's like the exciting part. So to go further into it, I kind of set an intention of going out there that I want to connect with like-minded people. Like, I want to increase my spiritual community. What better place than Sedona? Like, there's so many people who are spiritually aligned out there. And so I was on Airbnb, and obviously, I'm filming my tarot videos, so I have to pick a place that I can still film. So I had found this B&B that had this tub that I was like, oh my God, I need this place. And then it went off the market, and I was like, oh, I really wanted that tub. And then I happened upon this like room in a woman's house, had a tub, and I was like, okay. And a big part of me was like, okay, I don't want to stay in an apartment by myself because my purpose of going out there is to connect with other people. So I'll
Mm-hmm.
stay in somebody's home. And then so I was going to message her and be like, hey, hope you don't mind, like, just making sure, like, I have to record videos. I don't want to be a nuisance, like, if I'm in my room, in the room recording. And then I saw that she's actually a tarot reader. She has just recently made her own deck. She makes wands, and she's like a spiritual artist. So I was like, oh my God. She's like, yeah, I'll be at the studio. Like, I have my tarot studio. So I just spend the day at the studio. So you'll be fine to read. Like, and I was just like, oh my God, how aligned is that? I set an
Totally.
intention, and I already have, and she's like she's probably like around our age.
Okay.
So it's like a fun little mystic friend. Like, I already made
Right?
a connection.
And that's what I love about setting, like going on these travel experiences and setting those
Mm-hmm.
intentions because it's like, it makes things so much easier.
Yeah. And I'm going for 12 days. So it's like
Yeah.
everybody's asking me, like, oh, what's your plan while you're out there? I'm like, I have no idea. I'm just getting on the plane. I'm going
Going
out
with the
there
flow.
and going with the flow.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny because I'm like, I'm impulsive in the sense that I will book that trip. I'll be like, I had a dream that I went to Sedona. I have to book a trip to Sedona.
Yeah.
I'm impulsive in that sense, but at the same time, once I get on the trips, I'm very much the type of person that's like, yeah, there's no itinerary. I just want to get lost. I want to get
Right?
lost. And that's part of like my alias, like little girl lost. It's like, I just want to be like a kid and go and get lost and kind of not have any expectations for what's going to happen, but just
Mm.
like fall into a little adventure.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
love
like
it.
my favorite part of traveling, is just
I'm
kind of
so
going and
excited for
getting
you.
lost. Yeah. So, and then you've got some exciting stuff coming up.
Yeah. Well, talking about like tying up loose ends and stuff, it's yeah, interesting just like rehearing that story and how kind of similar some of our things have been about like just like men and breakups helping us find
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. Because one of the things that I've been doing recently, and something that I've wanted to do for a long time, but had some fears around, but is starting to like type up my journals and like
Mm.
publishing them. Um, and which, yeah, really effing scary, but also feels very present and like, oh, like there's some like really good stuff in here. And but I started writing morning pages like kind of while I was like going through a breakup and kind of yeah, like my first love and just so similar to your story, like that totally helped me find myself, you know? And
Yeah.
yeah, kind of like using them as a way to like remove myself from this toxic relationship. And it's so interesting, like as I'm reading these pages from like, yeah, 11, 12 years ago when I was like, one of my entries was like, in 2 weeks, I'll be 21. And I was like writing in this cafe in East Van and just reading the things that I was writing and like what my life was like. And I was like struggling so much, like trying to find my purpose. And I had no motivation. I used to smoke a
Mm-hmm.
ton of weed, working in bars, working in restaurants, and just really trying to like process myself through it, you know?
Yeah.
And like feeling so grateful for how far I've come and things that I would write about that I wanted to become or whatever are like now that's what I'm living. And anyway, so it's been interesting typing that stuff up and feeling like I'm connected with this past version self of me and then kind of like tapping into like how can I go back to like where I was living at that time and like leave her notes or like the bookstores that I would go
Mm-hmm.
into, like searching, so like I was just searching and searching for answers, like searching for somebody like me who I am now to like guide me back then, you
Yeah.
know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I've been really tapping into is like giving myself this little solo kind of mystic quest and like leaving little like
Yeah.
notes in
You
between the
have
books
to.
of
It's like my
right.
Sedona trip because it's like it's a quest. It's a quest. So that's
Yeah.
like it's funny when people ask me. It's like I'm going to time travel. I'm going
Right.
out to Sedona to time travel or to travel like
Yeah.
to communicate to I'm going out. Who are you going to visit? My
My
past self.
like I love that.
My past self. People are probably like, this girl.
Right.
It's so, that's the beauty about journaling, which is why I recommend everybody journal. Like, I've been journaling since I was in high school, and I have all my journals. Obviously, I wouldn't publish like these 18-year-old me ones
Yeah.
because they're just juvenile. Like every page is about some guy that I'm like, don't even talk to anymore
Right.
or
But then I
don't even
think
think
like
about.
how entertaining would that be for a 16, 17, 18-year-old girl
Yeah.
to read?
And it's kind of funny because I'm like, I love reading the journals and it's so interesting because I'm reading them and I feel so present. Like, I'm like, gosh, I remember feeling that way. But then I'm
Mm.
reading it with the notion of like, I know how this story ends though.
Yeah.
I know how this story ends. Like, it ends with me right here. Like, I never liked that guy. Like, I never, like, I got him and I never liked him. And it's like, a whole like I think this was like my best friend in high school and it was just this drama of like, oh, I don't know what to do about him and I feel that he doesn't like me. And then it's like you see like my college journals, it's like, well, he likes me and I feel really bad because I don't like him. So it's so funny to see. But yeah, I was reading some recently that it was like, I did go through like in college, a lot of my stuff was very emotionally detached. Like I had a detachment to my emotions. I think I had like gone through a phase where I really shut them off. And a lot of my writing is kind of like bleak. It's like, I just don't feel anything. I wish I could, I think
Mm.
something's wrong with me. I just don't feel anything. And then it's kind of interesting because that guy came into my life and like broke that wide open. And now I read those and I'm like, oh my God, look at me now, just
Right.
a sprinkler of feelings.
Well, and that's what's so cool about rereading these things is like you can see how you by writing you were in this bleak state or whatever, not feeling anything. And so that's almost scripting, like asking God or whatever for something to come in and like
Mm-hmm.
give you feeling. Like when I was rereading like the first journal that I started typing, I was like, I just need something. I need something. Like I'm so like lost. Like I need a change. Da 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 da. And then it was like, boom, within like a month or like moving up to that, and I didn't know obviously this was going to happen, but I was
Mm-hmm.
like asking for something, and then like my house caught fire and I lost everything and I had to move, and
Yeah.
that completely transformed like the direction of my life, because then I that's when I started writing, and
Yeah.
then 3 months later I moved from Vancouver to Toronto. And so it's so cool rereading that stuff of like, oh my God, I had no idea what was about to happen, but I was kind of
Yeah.
asking for something to happen.
Well, and it's also a way of like encapsulating these memories, these like things, like, because it's like our memories are so subjective, right? We remember things a certain way, but when you're writing something in the moment, it's kind of like, oh, it like it does like writing in a way is like a form of like a vehicle for time travel, because it's like
Is,
these
yeah.
memories are encapsulated in this thing, and like I can open my journal and read a page that I'm like, whoa, I forgot about that. Like I have, because I like to write letters a lot to people, like a lot of mine. So I've always thought about publishing my journals and it'd be called like letters to you,
Oh,
the
I love that.
ambiguous you,
Yeah.
because they're all like letters. Like if I am hurt over a guy, I'll write a letter and I'll read some of them and I'll be like, oh God, that guy. I'll be like, oh my God, I remember when that was so present.
Right.
Um, but it's so like, it's so interesting journaling. And then you read these things, then you can kind of remember these times of, say you moving to Toronto or kind of living somewhere else, being in a different place than you are now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, like I'm
yeah.
so excited to like get to that's like, I've written up the first I think couple months kind of thing, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's stimulating. Like I'm almost excited of like, ooh, I'm gonna get to like to Toronto soon and like see
Yeah.
what I was experiencing then. And yeah, it's just so fun and interesting. And
Yeah. I love the
yeah.
concept of like I would buy that book because I love this, like the intimacy of like reading somebody's essentially diary or
Right.
journal.
Well, and it's so interesting because like as a creative, as a writer, one of the things like I always ask myself is what would it look like if it was easy? And because a lot of the time, like if we want to take on a project or some new form of self-expression,
Mm-hmm.
like, and I've really struggled with like I've written like 2 or 3 books that are more like I don't want to use like self-help, but like let's just say
Oh
nonfiction,
yeah.
like about
Mm-hmm.
mysticism, like about my practices and everything, poetry. But
Yeah.
I've had like a big struggle around just pressing the button
Yeah.
and publishing,
Sending, yeah.
and sending. And
But it's about finding the right one. And that's to me,
that's the thing. Yeah.
yeah, because I've written some where I'm like, how to become the man of your dreams, or how to like, these how to's and these self help stuff. But that's not what I find passion in. I find passion in that like intimacy. Like everybody's wanting that connection. When I read a book, I'm looking to be like intimately involved with these words. Maybe that's my like creative take. I'm sure you're very similar, but I want to be like intimately involved with the words that I'm reading, like the
Yeah.
writer. I want to know. And that's what I find so intriguing about reading somebody's unedited journal, is like, this is so intimate.
Yeah.
And that's what we're all craving, right? Is that intimacy.
Totally. And it keeps reminding me of like, don't give people 4, give people 2 plus 2. And it's something
Yeah.
I keep reminding myself of like, yeah, I could write a whole how to thing with all of my processes. And I know like that's something
Mm-hmm.
that will come, but it's like someone could get so much more value out of like actually like seeing and reading what I was experiencing when I was trying to break up with the toxic
Yeah.
relationship, when I was trying to like figure out how to move on from like my house burning down or moving across the country, whatever those are. It's like that's so much more valuable, and I think it's more entertaining to read. And when I look at like, yeah, what's not only exciting for me to read, but what's exciting for me to write.
Yeah.
And I think when it looks, what does it look like when it's easy? It's like, okay, my writing practice every morning is so easy for me. Like I just wake up, I do it. It's not anything I think about.
Yeah.
So why not just leverage that? Like, why not
Yeah.
just like go in all in on that? If I'm like struggling in this other area, I think, yeah, like if we just really try and tap into like what comes easiest to us and like,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
and it's so true about just really kind of, and that's the part of, you know, working through whatever it is you're trying to work through, because, or like breaking down these blocks of being seen, because even like showing up online, you want there to be this intimate connection with you and the viewer. Like the viewer wants to feel like they really are seeing a part of you. And it just depends. Like some people are craving, the people who crave shallow interactions are going to go online and look at like pictures of, you know, surface stuff of like, this girl looks good in a bikini or this guy's hot. But it's like people who are craving that life-changing experience, people who are craving that real connection, they're going to gravitate towards you. The people who are meant to gravitate towards you will.
yeah,
So that's anything that you're doing, anything that you're releasing. And that's kind of what I've learned in my own experience with like, I don't know, creating. It's like create this environment that's like safe for intimacy.
yeah. I mean, there's really nothing more intimate than like sharing your,
Thoughts and feelings.
yeah, and
Yeah.
like expressing yourself.
Yeah.
And yeah, it takes a lot of courage, and
It
it takes a lot
does.
of like, it's like working out a muscle, you know. And like,
Yeah.
but the more that you do it, and I think that's what's so amazing about journaling is because again, you're practicing that intimacy with yourself, and so then it's going to be that much easier to then start being more intimate with other
Other
people.
people, yeah.
Yeah, and then through your content, if that's something that you want to do too, you know. It's
Yeah.
like stages.
Yeah. But that's the art that I like to consume, is something that makes me feel like I'm seeing this person's soul, or I'm like feel like they're stirring something in me. You
Mm-hmm.
know? I think that's like super, like, I don't know, it's so moving. But I don't know, I just feel like I've always had like an affinity for like poetry and that raw, I like raw stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of, you know, I do like the self-help books, like I'll read some like of those self-help books, but I'm more drawn in by like the people who are showing me, teaching me through their experiences,
Yeah.
which is like, I do love. I think in the last one we talked about the Eat, Pray, Love. I'll read
Yeah.
that one over again, just because one, I think she's a fantastic writer, and the way she kind of, you know, describes this like adventure,
Yeah.
or describes these like dark moments that, like, you know, sometimes you're afraid of sharing with people.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like that's one of my goals, is I want to be able to write a book. But yeah, it's kind of getting past the like, that it's hard, because I feel like me sitting down, I just want it to all be so intense and like me. I want it to be me encapsulated into,
Right?
you know, a book. So it's like I can't just write it. It has to be like I have to pour myself into it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I don't know. There's something about a
But
book
there's
that's
Yeah,
like,
but that's the beauty of just releasing your journals, because it's like you have poured yourself into it,
yeah.
because you didn't write it for the consumption of anybody else.
No, it's just like all of my processing and just my life,
Yeah.
like the experience of being a human, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I always distill everything down. I feel like my ultimate purpose, really refined, is just to like translate the human experience.
Yeah. I
And
agree.
just,
I agree
I
with
just
that
want to
one.
share like what it's like and,
What it's
for
like to be
something to,
human.
yeah, and like a
Yeah.
spiritual, mystical woman in like today's day and age. I mean, that's the name of our
I
podcast,
know. See,
It's just,
that's how I feel too. I'm like, I just want to write about my experiences, but that's why I'm so big on like cultivating experiences because I'm
right?
just like, I want to have these experiences. I want to live life and I want to be able to tell stories, you know? And I feel like as like a Sag rising, like that's like Sagittarius, like storyteller. I love
Mm,
my stories. And that's kind of funny when you're thinking of in like the and I was writing about this right before we came on, and I'll probably post it on Instagram. And I'm like, gosh, I love to tell my stories. Like I'm talking about it's thundering outside.
oh,
Um, I kind of was writing about how we have these constructed timelines, and even our language is designed to be beginning to end. A sentence has a beginning and it has
mm,
an ending.
mhm.
Everything's so linear, but so we've created this world in which we do have these stories that have beginnings and they have endings, and we're in a rush to get to the end. But it's like, I don't know, there's so much more. But then I think about it and I'm like, but I love the story. I love the
Yeah.
story. I
I
love
just,
that. I love creating the story.
right? And I love that you're bringing that up because that kind of wraps everything up that we've been talking about, is like this element of travel,
Yeah.
writing, being a creative, connecting with our past selves, tying up loose ends. Why travel and adventure is so important, because that's what stimulates the stories, that's what stimulates the experiences, which then turns into
Art.
art. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think like it's such a great recipe for, especially during this time right now where
Yeah.
every day can feel like Groundhog's Day. You can't maybe
Mm-hmm.
travel long distance, but you can travel in your own country. You can
Yeah.
like how can you
Go on
bring
an
that creative,
adventure. Go to a
yeah, bring,
small town that you've never been to before and like get lost. That's my favorite thing to
yeah.
do is just like find like little places that I've never been to, and I imagine myself like, what if I lived here? I'd come to this little restaurant here, and oh my gosh, if this were my home, like I just like to have these kind of little fantastical adventures. But yeah, I think what I'm going out to Sedona for is to kind of spark that. Like, what am I going to create next? What am I going to create next? And I'm going and I'm setting this intention to have this magical adventure, and then I'm just going to be inspired.
I love it. That sounds, it's so good. Like it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so good.
So
Man, this show has been awesome. I love like
I
everything that we've
know.
talked about.
I know. So I guess we should just wrap it up and leave it at kind of, yeah, because in the next few episodes we'll kind of see how this all played out.
Unfolds. Yeah. And I mean, really, like one of the things that we wanted to just kind of like say as we wrapped up was, this is going to be coming out kind of like halfway through 2020,
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great time to really reflect on like, what are the things that you can celebrate yourself for, like throughout this year? What are the things that you've accomplished, even if they're small? And like, what do you want to create, or what do you want to do with the remaining half of the year, and this
Yeah.
is a really good kind of checkpoint to see like, yeah, how can you stimulate that sense of adventure? What loose ends do you need to tie up so that you can really step into like the next chapter of your life, like really, open and like available and ready to
Mm-hmm.
receive.
Yeah. Totally.
Well, yeah, so thank you all so much for joining us today, and can't wait to hear what you think be sure to check us out on Instagram and comment below. And we will see you next time.
Awesome. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to follow us over on Instagram at Modern Life Mystic Woman, where we're sharing inspirational writing and magical lifestyle tips on the daily.
And if you loved this show, let us know. Subscribe, comment, shoot us a DM, whatever your style. And make sure to share it with all your spiritual besties.
See you next time.